Morning, everyone. Morning. I see numbers have increased. So just saying, we're from Wellington Academy, myself, James, this is Damien, my colleague. We're going to talk to you today about a germ of an idea. It's something that's really only just begun. And when I was asked to talk about it, I did say, well, isn't it a bit early yet? Shouldn't we wait until we've done it and see what the impact is? And I was told, no, now is the time to share. Because we've spent a lot of time developing this idea. We're just at the point where we're launching it. And actually sometimes, when an idea gets fixed within a context and in somebody's school, and you become then linked with that particular way of implementing it, it's not so easy to shape it and move it into another school. So we thought, yeah, share it now, and that way if you like the idea, you can take it and make it your own at that very early stage and shape it to fit you and your context. What we've been looking at is, I'm sure what all of you have been focusing on, how do we make our students ready for the 21st century? Yes, it's a common cause for all of us. We know it's got to be different than we did in the 19th and the 20th century. We know that the challenges they will face will be much more around flexibility, being creative, being also ethical, being motivated to actually make a positive difference, to look after our environment. The students we're sending out in the 21st century are the ones that are going to be running the world when we all retire. So we need to make sure they get it right. They're going to be the ones with the power. We need to make sure that they're flexible and creative enough to tackle all the problems we've given them, that they'll recognise all the things we did well and not mess about with those, that they've got the wisdom to see the difference between the two, and it's our responsibility to make sure we've equipped them for that. So that's quite a big challenge. It got us thinking, certainly, in terms of our own context. We've got, all of us, a very unique context here in Dubai. We really are international schools. We're allowed a certain level of independence in the way in which we portray our curriculum, the way in which we mould and shape the students that come through our schools, much more so than we can perhaps within a more government-run school, where we have impositions in terms of culture, in terms of expectations. So it's that freedom that really drove us to think, actually, we can make a difference. We can do things really differently here. We've got a context of, it's a great school, great facilities. We're doubling in size. So just to give you our context a little bit, we, at the moment, are based in this site at the top. This is the site that's being built at the moment, if anyone's visited us. We're over in Silicon Oasis, the school on the hill. There aren't many hills in Dubai, but we're on one. It's a very small one. And that's where we're based. Currently, we've moved from 2 years ago when we had about 900 students. We're currently just under 3,000. And by the time the schools move through from primary, we'll be on about 4,500 once we reach our full capacity. We teach from 3 to 18, just opened our sixth form this year. So that's our context in a nutshell. And so what have we been doing within that context? Significant for us last year was our name as an IB school. We became an IB World School, not throughout the school. We're a UK national curriculum school. Goes from early years foundation stage through the national curriculum into GCSE and IGCSE, although we did drop in BTECs last year. And we moved then through into IB Diploma and IB Careers Related Certificate at sixth form. But I think anybody else who knows about the IB or who is an IB school, anybody else here linked with the IB? So you know that IB is not just a curriculum, it's a philosophy. And I think when you become an IB school, you really have to rethink what you're doing in school and how does it match the whole ethos, that core student ethos of the IB. It made us reflect, certainly. Made us look back at our vision and aims. We did a lot of rethinking around that and remodelled ourselves because of that. This is our current vision. Ambitious. We do want to be catalysts for change. We do want to be innovative. We really want to create those international-minded students, capable of leading and influencing. Making sure that not only do we have students who have a thirst for learning, which we had in our original one, but a capacity to do it well. And it's those learning competences that we really then wanted to focus on. So it was this new mission that was then driving what we wanted to do. So where did that take us next? Well, we started thinking about where can we make most difference. We do really well in developing that inquiry-based learning in with the early years foundation stage. Lots of opportunity there for growth within the national curriculum through into primary. All of our units within primary are inquiry-based units, they're cross-curricular, so they really focus on developing those skills, but we've started to building some learning competencies in those earlier years. We end up with the IB, which is very focused on learning skills, learner profile, and teaching in that cross-dimensional, international way. What we needed to look at was the lead-in. So we've really focused on Key Stage 4. We're very committed to qualifications at Key Stage 4. It's really important for students who have that mobility around to different countries that they can walk away at 16 with some certificates in their hand that allow them to transfer to different schools around the world. But we wanted to think for our own students. We're an inclusive school, we don't select. What are we offering at Key Stage 4 in terms of the curriculum, and how can we move that more effectively into IB, and how can we give them the best opportunity to be successful? So what we've looked at is a long-term progress where we're going to extend our Key Stage 4 to being 3 years instead of 2. Why? Because Key Stage 4 curriculum tends to be very content, very teacher-led and driven, and there isn't as much flexibility in terms of timing to actually deliver it the way you would want to, building up those learning competences. There isn't the time for thinking about the way in which you present the materials and the opportunities to explore in different ways. So by providing that extended curriculum, we've got a huge opportunity there to enrich what we're doing and to give opportunities for students to have more options, to extend their options, to move from one into another, to prepare for higher level study at IB. It gives us that flexibility. Which means then we have to think, what do we do here? If we're going to enrich what we're doing at Key Stage 4, if we're going to lead them successfully into IB, what do we do at that pivot 2 years, 7, 8? Not 7, 8, 9 anymore, 7 and 8. That is the actual key moment where we're going to make the most difference. If we're really going to get them to be successful at Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5, that's where we really have to hit those learning competences. We really have to teach them how to be not just great students, but great learners. The schools are not driven only by their teachers, it's a partnership between the students and the teachers. And yes, to here's from our school, you made that point very well. It is about partnership, and it's about making those students ready and able to take on the challenge. So this is where we're basing our competence-led curriculum. This is where it will make most difference, and this is where we'll make most change. So yes, we keep the content, it's still national curriculum, but having to condense it 3 years into 2, so we've got to be selective then about what we include, and we've got to split screen it with learning competences alongside the curriculum knowledge and content. So how do we get those competences? I'm going to talk a little bit about the why, the introduction and where we start, and then I'm going to hand over to Damien, who's going to tell you a little bit about the how we moved it forward. The first big thing we had to do was decide on our competences. There's lots of information out there, lots of other ideas. Some of it was driven by the fact that we were IB. Anybody who's in IB school is very familiar with the learner profile. All of these are attributes of learners. We had a lot of conversation, I don't know if you've had the same in your school, lots of conversation about that terminology. Do we call them attributes? Do we call them skills? Do we argue about it all day? That's why we call them competences, because we want them to be competent learners. Not the most exciting word in the world, I know. But that real quality, that competence, the confidence to really fulfill their potential, we felt summed it up better than calling them attributes or skills, and then we stopped the arguments. So there's all these parts that come as part of the learner profile. Of course we want to incorporate those. The IB spent a lot of time, putting a lot of thought and energy into that. They're all valid. We also had a look at what happens beyond school. What makes people employable? What makes them successful? So looking at the CBI, employability skills, building those in as well. And we also thought, even when we put all of those things together, there are still a few missing that we thought were really important. We wanted to make sure that creative was really up there. It's incorporated in some of the other competences there, but we really wanted to highlight that. Resilience we thought was really important. It wasn't really featured highly in the other ones that were mentioned. And collaboration, yes, it comes in with communication and a few other areas, but we know that going out into the real world, it's collaborative learning and working together that really makes a difference. So that was the set of competences that we came up with. It took us quite a while to get there. That whole process took us most of the last 2 terms, going through talking with students, talking with teachers, talking with our parents, getting their feedback, and coming up with something that we all felt was really valid and that we wanted to include in our Key Stage 3 curriculum.
Because what we've got to try and do is look back at Jane's vision, our WSO, our school vision, and think about how we were actually going to do that. So just thinking back to that slide with all those lovely words and what we wanted to do. Because if we're going to do that, we had to fundamentally rip apart quite a lot of the structures and the bits that went behind the strategy. Structure and strategy, of course, fundamentally linked. So I'll look at 4 aspects of that very quickly here. So first of all, how we changed our structures, how we changed our learning blocks, how we put a greater focus on learning inquiry, and then also looked at how we've used enrichment to enhance the experiences and give another context for the competence development. So a little bit whistle stop. This is the first thing we did, and it was painful going through and explaining. It took a whole year to get to the point where we determined what our structure would look like, but it came to a point where we were, if you're looking at left to right, looking at traditional departments which we started to view as stovepipes, and thinking how we could group them together to make new schools. And we actually created 3 new schools, which takes away the heads of department structure and builds them in together into a interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, faculty-based construct, with its own director for maths, science, technology, with its assistant director. If we're going to be focused on curriculum, we'll put a leadership position in there for Key Stage 3 curriculum, and then having our teachers as MST teachers, maths, science and technology teachers. The same through these schools, schools of language and communication teachers, and the School of Arts, Humanities, Sport and Leisure. It's quite a fundamental change in the way that we're asking our teachers to be organised and led. So that's the secondary school phases. I'll come back to what that offers us an opportunity in a minute, but just take a note please of, say, MST, LNC and AHSL. Now, if you are like me and a lot of our parents, one of the things I did well at school, and probably a reason why I ended up teaching and so on and so forth, but I went through a process where I did an hour lesson, actually going to get into competence development and to develop the skills that will come from inquiry-based learning. Is we need to create the space for that to happen. So we've created longer learning blocks. Now they're not as rigid as they are up there, because there are perfectly good opportunities for us to break those blocks down into separate sessions where needed. But in terms of our thinking and our approach, we have actually put 3 learning blocks into the school day. This is what a Year 7 typical timetable now therefore looks. This is before we even started getting into the teaching and learning part. And you'll notice on here that there's still a lot of the subjects that you would be familiar with. You'll notice that we've got the Arabic, we've got the French, the English, the PE, the maths in there, but also interspersed in the timetable here, you'll note blocks, learning blocks that belong to the faculty I described earlier, the schools, MST school, AHSL school, language and communication school. And it is in these blocks here where there are opportunities for that competence development, that inquiry-based learning, that deeper thinking, the higher order skill development. A different approach to teaching and learning happens within those spaces. Also point you to the enrichment blocks, because last year we did enrichment after school. I had a superb program of events after school, but I mean, like a lot of our students, not enough of them were taking part in them. It was a bolt-on at the end of the day. If they weren't getting buses home or picked up and all the traffic that goes in with that, actually a lot of our students were missing out on that opportunity. So we made a conscious decision to bring it into the curriculum, so there was a proper entitlement for it. So we achieved the entitlement, but also it was also another vehicle for those competencies to be developed. And I'll just sort of talk about that in this model here. If you remember on the top right here, that's the timetable there. So we have this enrichment block here and this enrichment block here, and actually it starts here, so it's a good 2 hours of enrichment. What we were looking at doing is having on our Monday enrichment what we call a choice enrichment. We want the students to have the opportunity to take their interests where they want to go. So we're putting a full program of choice enrichment, huge amount of teachers, huge amount of talent, huge amount of resources, world-class facilities to take advantage of. So we will use them. The students take choices. For the whole year, they'll be doing option blocks and having the opportunity to go through 6 different programs through the year. Now that's great, that's choice. But we've also brought in house enrichment, which is one of the things I haven't talked about as part of this, because it's part of pastoral. But we've gone vertical tutoring this year as well, just to make life easier for ourselves. And with house enrichment, what we've looked at doing on this Thursday afternoon is to link, not base, but link rotations, house activities based around some of the IB core curriculum. So there'll be activities linked to creativity, linked to action, linked to service, linked to theory and knowledge. Actually, it's probably more creative thinking skills as we've got it at the moment. But again, large blocks, interest-led, students having the opportunity, and the teachers being very clear from our expectation is that they are there also to develop the competencies of our students. So what's the approach? Well, we talked about, we had a staff training day yesterday, and a lot of teachers who have obviously arrived this year talk about, we're starting off this year, have referred to our competence approach as the competence monster. You know, what is this? I've just turned up, I've taught like this, and now you're asking me to focus on competences. So we spend a lot of time and there's a lot of impact on the training in terms of how do we actually approach the delivery of competencies within lessons. And we focused on our teachers making sure that they are making the students aware of competencies. That can be as simple as the language we use, referring to the competencies as they turn up in the classroom, explaining to students about what it is that they're going through in relation to those competencies. It may or may not be explicit, but we're also interested in the development of. And we're very much looking for our teachers to find and to stage proper developmental lessons where content at times will play second fiddle to the competence development. And that means we're putting, at times, the competence right at the heart of what we wish to do, because it's that important. And getting our teachers to understand that, and that balance between, well, are you telling me to put more focus on this and actually go with this today? Yeah, absolutely. Aren't I going to be a lesson behind in this particular skill or this particular knowledge? Well, you may well be. But if the competences are what we want to develop, and if we trust our competence curriculum, then the students will pick up and drive forward with those new learning skills. The competence will self-correct, as it were. And then also building in at every level the opportunity to reflect in action on action, as you'd expect. That's where people will then start, and students will start internalising those competences. That's not very clear. I'm conscious of a slight bit of time. James already mentioned that what we're trying to do in year 7-8 is get them across this threshold here into Key Stage 4, okay, with the competencies that we think are fundamental for learning success, but we also want to get them over this threshold with as much of the relevant skills, national curriculum content as is relevant. So we've done that by backward mapping the curriculum, as you'd hope, and making sure that what we do deliver in Key Stage 3 is that which is on the golden path. It's not a 100% solution, but it gets them very close, and we do have to trust that those competencies will compensate and absolutely lead to success. What does that look like? This is a slightly older slide. These things are changing daily, but this is what the Math, Science and Technology team are pushing out this term, for example. Conceptual based, big questions, which you'd hope. A competence focus made very clear. In fact, we picked 2 for this particular module. A challenge output. So what is it that they're going to be asked to do? What's going to make each lesson worthwhile sitting through? What's linking math, science and technology together? And then making it clear what's being picked up in maths that they're covering, in science, in technology. and making sure at the end of that they have a big dose of reflection to make sure that where there's been opportunities to be aware of a competence, that they actually do understand that competence, where they've had opportunities to develop it, that has actually been owned, it's internalised by the students. This is a busy slide. It's a busy slide because what we're trying to do here is trying to help the students go through a reflection process. It's also helping the teachers at this stage. What we've done is we've put our competencies all the way down this list here, and this is just the top part of our slide. There's 4 pages of it because each of these are a competence. And we've also mapped along across the top here, and in each of these contexts it's possible to provide a framework of thinking for the teacher and the student to think about their competence development. So as an example, you could be, for example, here, looking at developing the ability here, and it could be that for the individual that they've developed and demonstrated these sort of bits and pieces. So have they done this? Have they become more curious, more independent? That's on the lifelong learner side. Obviously it will be different on the other side, and this is where they might be looking to make an impact on this. They've got to reflect. This is an empty slide. I haven't got an example. We haven't done our first one yet. This is a work in progress. But what we want them to do is to sit down at the end of their module and really focus on what it is that they've done. I want them to put up here what it is that they've produced. I want them to take this home. I want them to own it. It's got to be theirs. So if that's a performance or a piece of work they're proud of, or whatever it is where they develop this particular competence, then put it in. I'm hoping it'll look a little bit more sophisticated than that in due course, but you get the idea that we have to stage the reflection rather than just hope it happens. And it might end up with something like that. It might end up with a student talking about how they've performed, or how they, that was some student presenting up here and talking about. So next steps. Well, next steps is the ongoing steps. We're spending an incredible amount of time planning. We don't get on the web and say, look, can I get a learning pack for this stuff? It's just not out there. So we're having to design this stuff ourselves. A math science MST lesson that goes on for 2 hours and a pack, it's just not in a box. So this is being done as we go along. We have the outlines of what we want to achieve. We're very clear on the plan in outline. And we have to constantly do this. We're reflecting after our training day, we're reflecting on the pain that our teachers are going through, but also we're reflecting on the wonderful work that's already taking place. We've been going on for about 4 weeks on this now, and already the quality and the interest from those Year 7 students who have started is just, it makes it worthwhile. That's why the teachers are putting the work into it. That's us. It started off with an idea where James sort of said, well, we know where we come from. It's world school, it's a philosophy, it's a vision. We're now spending a lot of time trying to put that vision into a strategy, into structures that will support it. So far, it's working in terms of the student experience. The teacher experience is quite, well, it's a lot of hard work. Are they finding it easy? No, they're not. But the real value, I hope, is when we come back another time, Jane, and hopefully come back in a year's time and talk about exactly how we've got with this program. But we're very excited about it.
What happens is, instead of thinking about your subject as being a certain number of hours per week, what you do is look at the subject over a long period of time. So percentage-wise, you would keep the same balance, but you might condense and have one subject focused on for a block of time, then the next, then the next. Instead of saying we will rigidly do this number of minutes per week for this subject and this subject, and reproduce that every week, whether that's relevant or not. The modules themselves contain the same percentage of science compared to the same percentage of design technology, compared to the same percentage of IT, but they might have blocks of time where you focused on one and then on the next and then on the next. So over a couple of months it will look the same, but week by week it's not. We have lots of systems, I'm sure you have in school, for the teachers to share ideas with one another. So we've got virtual environments within school, and we're using cloud technology a lot in terms of sharing resources. So while we've got our own shared area on the server, we're also using Dropbox, we're also using cloud technology to share ideas. So people are sharing their PowerPoints, their resources, their ideas, and interacting virtually as well as physically sitting in the same room together. So I think when you've got a new idea starting, the value of actually sitting people in the same room together is really important, and it's the conversations face to face that then can develop to a more virtual distance approach once that initial part has taken place, I think, really.